How you doing, everybody? Vasu, Vaddiparty here with the VPartySports Podcast for this Tuesday afternoon, 3 o'clock on the East Coast, 12 o'clock on the West Coast. If you missed any of the segments or the best bet segment, this program will loop up until 7 o'clock Eastern tonight, 4 o'clock on the West Coast. Let me give you one play here real quick because the bowl games or scenarios are going, but we will have the daily post at 6 Eastern as well, too, along with the best bet segment here. In 15 minutes, the Memphis Tigers are taking on the Utah State Aggies in the ServPro First Responder Bowl, and that game is being played in Dallas, Texas. Right now, Memphis is a 7.5-point favorite. It's 8 in some places, the total 57. But Memphis right now, take the Memphis Tigers. You'll have that in about 15 minutes. Georgia Southern and Buffalo are going right now in the Camellia Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama. Props to the Buffalo fans for making a trip out of that terrible weather. In fact, the Buffalo radio crew could not get out as I'm watching it. Did a story that they had to bring in the South Alabama football radio program to come in and do the game as a substitute for them to get the game back in Buffalo. So the Buffalo Bulls right now, as we're taping, 17-14 the lead over Georgia Southern. Midway through the third quarter, if you had Georgia Southern, you laid 6, and the total was 66.5. Don't know if it's going to get there or not. At 17-14, but that's where we're at right now. In about 7 minutes, the Memphis Tigers are going to take on the Utah State Aggies. Take them minus 7.5. Memphis minus 7.5 to win the game outright. That starts at 3:15, 12:15 on the West Coast. We'll get the best bet segment for the rest of the games as well. All right, Vasu Vaddiparty here, as we said. We'll be back Thursday, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, with a full NFL preview of Week 17, NBA, NCAA, basketball, bowl previews, as well as we head to the weekend with the BCS Semifinals coming up on Saturday between Michigan and TCU in the Fiesta Bowl, Georgia and Ohio State in the Peach Bowl. The Daily Post at 6 p.m. Eastern weekdays. I'll make sure to have some edited posts for the bowl games that start early. I know college basketball's got some early tournament games going as well, too. And if you're interested in sponsorships, please contact me directly on Twitter, Instagram, at VPartySports. You can also get to me on Facebook at Vasu Vaddiparty. Of course, you can find us on YouTube here as well. All right, let's get to it. Let's start with Monday Night Football. First of all, the Chargers win 20-3 over the Colts. They clinch a playoff spot. Chargers are now 9-7. They're in 6th place. They're firmly in 6th place in the NFL playoff scenario. Miami has the 7th spot right now, but that could be subject to change the way the Dolphins have played. Dolphins lost to Green Bay over the weekend on Christmas Day. We'll get to that in a second as well, too. But right now, the Miami Dolphins in the 7th spot at 8-7. Chargers clinch at 9-6. They have the head-to-head over Miami, so they're not going to fall below Miami unless they lose more games. There's still 2 games left in the regular season after Week 16 was completed last night. By the way, let me give you the best bet segment here. How about this? 4-0 on Sunday. I have it right here as proof. Well, those of you that followed my post, 4-0 on Sunday with the NFL. 2-1, 1-1 on Sunday, Christmas Day, 4-0 Saturday, 5-1, and then last night 6-1, and Jacksonville on Thursday. So 7-1, and I'm hitting about 68 to 70%. So you may want to follow my NFL picks. The NBA went well, 4-0-1 on Sunday, Christmas Day, 2-1 yesterday. So we're looking at 6-1-1 the last couple of days in the NBA. Bowl games have been 50-50, but nobody's really interested in the bowl games until except the sports wagers until Saturday when Michigan and TCU play, Georgia and Ohio State play. New Year's Eve, 4:30 Eastern for the first one from Phoenix, 1:30 here on the West Coast, 2:30 in Phoenix, and then 8 o'clock East Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. Georgia, number 1, faces the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes. The top 6 in the BCS, and there's still some good bowl games going on here, is Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, Ohio State 4, Alabama 5, and Tennessee 6. Alabama and Tennessee will play each other. Tennessee, I take that back. Let me make sure I got this right here. Tennessee will play Clemson on the 30th, and Alabama and Kansas State on the 31st, early in the morning. So 2 games early, and then the final 4 games are the last 2 games for Saturday. And then, of course, you got the traditional January 1st games, which are untraditionally on January 2nd, because the NFL is Sunday, and that's all on January 1st. All right, so there's where we have it now. The The lines for the game: Georgia 7 versus Ohio State, 62.5. That's 1 versus 4. That's the Peach Bowl. And then Michigan 7.5 versus TCU, 58.5. That is the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. The winners will meet the following Monday, January 9th, at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. As we said, the Chargers and Rams own that place right now. The Chargers got in the playoffs last night with the 20-3 victory. Austin Eckler had 2 touchdowns of 1 yard each. Keenan Allen had 11 catches, 104 yards. Chargers win 20-3. They're in the playoffs right now. The only spot left in the AFC, that 7th spot, or is the last spot. Chargers could still end up in the 7th spot. But right now, the top 6 are Buffalo at the 1 spot, Kansas City at 2, Cincinnati at 3, Jacksonville at 4 after their win and Tennessee loss over the weekend. Jacksonville's taking over first place. And then Baltimore at 5, the Chargers at 6, Miami at 7. In the NFC, Philadelphia with the best record. Minnesota, 1 game back, but they lose the tiebreaker to the Eagles. 13-2 for Philadelphia, 12-3 for Minnesota. The 49ers, 11-4. They have a shot to get to number 2 still. They have a better conference record than Minnesota as far as tiebreakers go. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as of right now, are 7-8. They won on Sunday night. They won, what's today? Today's Monday. They won last night on Sunday Night Football, 19-16 in overtime. We'll get to the recaps of the Christmas Day games and Saturday football in a second. But the playoff scenarios, the Dallas Cowboys are 5th. The New York Giants are 6th. Washington Commanders are 7th. Green Bay won over Miami. So they're right there with Washington and the Giants. They lost to both the Giants and Washington. So they have no tiebreaker edge. They're going to have to hope that both those teams lose going forward. And then the Detroit Lions, who Green Bay also lost to. I believe Green Bay has to play them one more time. They do. The last game of the year, they have to play the Lions in Green Bay. They lost to Detroit the year 15-9. Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers only got 9 points against the Lions back on November 6th. So, big scenario for the Lions. They can still get in. They have a problem in terms of being able to get in as well because they're behind Washington. They beat the Giants. So right now they need Washington to lose at least once, and the Lions can win twice. They beat the Giants. So if they can end up in some kind of scenario with the Giants, they'll have the tiebreaker edge over the Giants. That tie game that they had a few weeks back between the Giants and Commanders really hurting everybody because that takes a loss away from somebody and a win away from somebody as well. So that's the playoff scenario that we have right now. Chargers in 20-3 over the Colts last night. They get their 9th win of the year. 2 more games left. They host. I think they go. I know they play. They might play the Raiders. They have the Rams next week, so they've got 1 conference game left, and I believe that is against the Broncos. Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, Broncos, all to be determined for Week 18. Okay, you'll see the ticker go across to the bottom. We'll have all the NBA lines, the hockey lines, college basketball. Only 1 college basketball game that's on the board, and that's in the Big East between Marquette and Seton Hall. And then hockey, after 4 days, is back tonight with a full schedule. So you have the hockey lines going across as well, too. But let's recap Saturday football. Actually, let's start with Christmas Day. Green Bay Packers behind Aaron Rodgers. They got the 26-20 win yesterday over Miami. They were down 20-10, 16 straight points for the Packers in the 4th quarter. 4 field goals for Mason Crosby, A.J. Dillon a 1-yard run, and Mercedes Lewis a 1-yard touchdown. The Dolphins came out on fire. Tua Tagovailoa had a good start to the first half. They had 1 turnover. They got a couple of field goals. Once the missed field goal by Sanders happened at 48 yards, you knew that the momentum was going to Green Bay. So 26-20, Green Bay, we gave you the scenario. They're 7-8. Miami needs 1 more win at least. They have the Patriots next weekend who need a win to stay in. And then the final weekend of the year, they have the Jets who look like they're not going to make the playoffs as well, too. So Green Bay beats Miami. Their playoff hopes are a lot. And as a Bears fan, I can tell you, watching the Green Bay Packers, you give Aaron Rodgers any type of momentum, he can run. It's be tough for that NFC to deal with Aaron Rodgers and that crew. The defense is giving up a lot of points. See how it goes for that scenario. But first, they got to get in. And right now, they've got the 2 scenarios that they're in are the Packers and Vikings at home next week for Green Bay, and then the Lions on the final weekend. So that's the scenario for Green Bay. And the Rams had Nathaniel Hackett fired yesterday, 51-14. They ripped Denver due to the Rams. Baker Mayfield was up 2 touchdowns. Cam Akers, who didn't get a lot of playing time early in the year, 118 yards, 3 touchdowns in the win, 51 points. You're going to get a lot of good statistics. And then Tampa Bay, 19-16 in overtime, and they stay in first in the NFC South because Carolina won over the Lions on Saturday. So Carolina 6-9 now. Tampa Bay 7-8. Carolina has the tiebreakers, and if they can run the table, including a win over Tampa Bay, they can win the NFC South. A very interesting scenario that they have going on there in Carolina. We'll get to the topic here in a second here. Tennessee, well, let's see. And then the last game, as I said, Tampa Bay 19-16. They stay over Carolina and New Orleans. New Orleans loses the tiebreaker scenario in all the scenarios in a 3-way tie between Carolina, Tampa Bay, and New Orleans. So right now, Tampa Bay 7-8, Carolina, New Orleans 6-9 in the NFC South, and only one team is going to be out of that division, both in the AFC South and the NFC South as well too. So you have it here. Let's see. We have the NFL stuff right here. So make sure I have this here. I don't have it right now, but anyway, Jacksonville won on Thursday. We know that they beat the Jets. Tennessee lost to Houston 19-14, and they're out of the playoffs as of right now because you're not going to get in with a 7-8 record. Jacksonville in first place as they beat the Jets on Thursday night. Steelers still in it a little bit. Came back on the Raiders. Franco Harris's jersey retirement. Of course, he passed away last week tragically at 72. 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they get that win on Saturday night. We told you about New Orleans beating Cleveland. They're one back in the South. They're going to have a lot of factors. They're going to have to win the next 2 games and hope that Carolina and Tampa Bay lose in order for them to have a shot at the division. Cincinnati beat New England. They almost gave it away late. They got a fumble late in the game. 7 straight for the Bengals. Interesting scenario for the Cincinnati Bengals because Buffalo won. They win 35-13. They stay at number 1. Kansas City beats up on Seattle 24-10. They stay number 2. We mentioned Seattle already. We got that going on. The Giants lose to Minnesota. They're in 6. Washington gets pulverized by San Francisco. San Francisco's won 8 straight, but Washington's 7th. San Francisco still has a shot at the 2 spot. But anyway, back to the AFC. So here's the scenario. The Bengals are 11-4. Buffalo's 12-3. Kansas City is 12-3. Kansas City will have Denver next week and the Raiders the final week. Broncos, Chiefs, and then 49ers, Raiders next week. The Bills will have the Dolphins. Do that already. The Bills and Dolphins. No, Bills and Bengals. That's what I was going to get to. The Bills and Bengals play next Monday night. It's an out-of-division game. But here's the scenario. Cincinnati will host Buffalo next week. They're 11-4. Buffalo's 12-3. A win, Cincinnati has the tiebreaker over Buffalo. They've already beaten Kansas City this year too. So I know it's kind of difficult to keep up and you just look at it after each week. But let's put it this way. If Cincinnati wins out, Kansas City loses 1 game. Buffalo and Kansas City and Cincinnati are all tied at 12-4 or 13-4 going in at the end of the season. Cincinnati will get the number 1 seed because they will beat Buffalo on Monday night. They've already beaten Kansas City at home, and they're at home, and that crowd is revved up and ready to go in Cincinnati for that big matchup between the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow, 2 of the hottest teams right now in the NFL. So that's the scenario in the AFC as far as the top seed. Philadelphia has yet to clinch the 1 seed. In the NFC, they've got the, let's see who they have next week. The Eagles have the Saints next week, and then they've got Washington, I believe, to close out the year as everybody closes out. No, Washington and Dallas. So it's the Eagles and the Giants will close out the NFC East schedule as well between next week and the week after. Cowboys open up Thursday night against the Titans. Titans need that game to stay within playoff range as well as the AFC South. Dallas in the 5th seed right now. They're 2 back of Philadelphia for the number 1 seed in the NFC East overall. They've lost to Philadelphia already, but then they beat them last weekend 40-34. So you figure that the Cowboys are going to need a lot of help in order to overtake Philadelphia for that division title. They're in the playoffs right now, but can you imagine if Philadelphia, after starting off 11-1, not going to be the number 1 seed? And then Minnesota, they probably will not have a chance at the 1 seed because they've lost to Philadelphia already. But San Francisco has a chance to catch Minnesota for the number 2 seed. Are you confused yet? I'm sure you're confused yet. But we'll break it down on Thursday with the VParty Sports Podcast, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific. Full NFL preview, full NBA, NCAA, bowl previews as well. The Daily Post is 6 Eastern weekdays, sponsorship inquiries. And if you're interested in that, please contact me directly as well. All right. When we come back in 30 seconds, NFL all set for Week 17, a full preview on Thursday. The NBA for today. We'll give you the Christmas Day scenario. 5 great games on TV yesterday. If you sat around on Christmas Day, we're able to watch the NFL and the NBA. Good NBA games yesterday. Some of the teams that were favored all came through. Big day for me. 5-0. Unless you had Denver Nuggets at -3 or less, then that's considered a win. But it's a push for me. But 4-0 in the NBA yesterday with 1 tie. It doesn't sound too bad to me. And then 1-1 in the NFL with that scenario. So 5-1 overall going into today, going into yesterday, and then 2-1 yesterday in the NBA with the Chargers as well. So 3-1 after yesterday. So we're here on Tuesday. It is about 25 minutes after the hour. Don't forget replays at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock going into game times for tonight. Lots of NBA to talk about. So when we come back in 30 seconds, we'll hit the NBA. We'll go over the Christmas weekend, and we'll talk NCAA football and bowls games as we get going here on the VParty Sports Podcast with you on this Tuesday afternoon. Back in 30. All right, welcome back to the VParty Sports Podcast on this Tuesday afternoon, about 3:20, 3:25 on the East Coast, 12:30 here. If you missed the free play already, maybe you can do a live bet on Memphis. It's already started. 12:15, the Memphis and Utah State game's already started. 7.5 was Memphis favored by, and the total, I don't remember what the total was. Let me see if I can find it here. The total was, I believe it was 52.5. So either way, the game has started, so you might have to get in on a live wager. 57, the total for Memphis and Utah State. Other bowl games tonight, we'll get to those in a second. But let's hit the NBA. The NBA tonight, you see the ticker going across the bottom with all the lines. NBA, the Orlando Magic, 3.5 versus the Lakers, 235.5. Philadelphia, 4.5 at Washington. Washington's given Philadelphia trouble this year. 225.5. The Celtics, 14.5. over Houston. They had a big win over Milwaukee on Sunday. 230.5 there. Houston just upset the Bulls on the road yesterday. Atlanta 1.5 at Indiana. 238.5. A lot of points there in Indiana. Indiana lost to the Pelicans last night. Clippers came back in overtime against Detroit. 141-132. They covered. Went way over, obviously, with overtime and 270 points. Raptors favored by 4, 218.5. Memphis -8, 226. Of course, the Grizzlies lost to the Warriors on Sunday night, Christmas night in San Francisco. No Curry, no Wiggins yet. They came out and played with fire, and Memphis didn't know what hit them. 226 the total versus Phoenix, who lost to Denver as the last game of the night on Christmas night. 7 versus San Antonio, 236.5. One thing about the Thunder, they always seem to cover. I don't know whether they're an underdog or a favorite, which means they'll have to win tonight as a favorite. San Antonio beat Utah last night at home as well. And then finally, Dallas -5 versus the Knicks, 218.5. Denver off their win versus Phoenix on Christmas Day at Sacramento. Sacramento playing well, though they've had some tough losses. They're 6th in the playoff range, as you'll see on the standings in a second here. 241 on 8, 4.5. 240.5 versus Charlotte. No Curry. Wiggins might be back. Be interesting to see how that scenario goes because it's a no Curry, and he always plays well against Charlotte. It's his hometown, and his dad, of course, the TV analyst for the Charlotte Hornets as well too, Del Curry. the sharpshooter from back in the day in the 90s. You see the standings go across. Let me give you the rundown here. Celtics 24-10, Milwaukee 22-11, Brooklyn 22-12. After their win over Cleveland yesterday, Cleveland falls to fourth at 22-13. Philadelphia 20-12, Knicks are 18-16. The Hawks are 17-16, and Indiana 17-17. Those two play each other tonight. Miami got a win last night without Bam Adebayo in the lineup, 17-17. Toronto 10th at 15-18. The West goes like this. Denver's still in the 1 spot at 21-11. Pelicans 21-12 in the 2 spot. Memphis 20-12 in the 3 spot. The Clippers now in the 4th spot at 20-15. Phoenix 19-15 in the 5 spot. Sacramento, we said, in the 6th spot, 17-14. Dallas 18-16. Portland 18-16. Utah 19-17 in the 9th spot. And Golden State, with their win over Memphis, is now back in the 10th spot. Remember, we have 10 teams that make the playoffs. The last 4 play in, so the top 10 spots are what you need. All right. Christmas Day Sunday. Let's go through the NBA a little bit. We had them here. Philadelphia came back to beat New York 119-112. Both Embiid and Randall had 35 points each. Sixers were down by 12 early. They came back in the second half, beat them. Dallas Mavericks scored 51 points on a terrible Lakers defense in the third quarter, Christmas afternoon in Dallas. They came back and not only took over a 13-point deficit, they ended up winning by 9 and covering the point spread. Boston outscored Milwaukee second half, ended up winning by 21 over the Bucks. Bucks still having a tough time on the road. Golden State beats Memphis. They were down in the third quarter at one point, but they had a big lead in the first half. But then they came back. Lots of Jordan Poole. 6 technical fouls in that game, by the way, including Klay Thompson. Jordan Poole got ejected. Of course, Draymond Green. You can't mention technical fouls without Draymond Green. He got one as well, too. And then Denver, Jamal Murray hit a game-tying shot versus Phoenix. They got Booker back on Sunday night as well for the first time. If you had a prop bet on Devin Booker for over his points, I don't know what the point total was, but if you had an over bet, he got injured in the game and he left. So DraftKings and FanDuel refunded your bet back to you. Now, I don't know very many sportsbooks that do it, and I'm not sure I'm in favor of that. I understand that it's good for them and good business for them to refund those bets. But if you make a bet and the action takes place, then you should take the L, as the old saying goes. Take the L. But because there's no way that some of the other sportsbooks would do that if you did that. But DraftKings and FanDuel trying to establish themselves as the friendly sports book. So that's what we've got in the NBA. Tonight in the NBA, as we said, we've got some games going on. Orlando and Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Washington, Boston, Houston, Atlanta, Indiana, Toronto and the Clippers, Memphis, Phoenix, Oklahoma, San Antonio, Dallas and New York, and Dallas, Denver at Sacramento, Golden State hosting Charlotte. 2 bowl games, 3 bowl games. The Memphis-Utah State game has already started, but East Carolina -7 versus Coastal Carolina, 66 the total. Wisconsin, it's going to be an interesting game to see because Jim Leonard said he's not coming back to Wisconsin. So now they've got their third coach, so that would make him the second interim coach. They're a 4.5-point favorite over Oklahoma State, who started off hot, but then gave up 1 million points in the last 5 games, it seems like. And they're a 4.5-point underdog with the total being at 44. That game in Phoenix tonight. Let me make sure I get these bowl games right, even though they're not paying me. So make sure I get these. The Ticket Smarter Birmingham Bowl is Coastal Carolina, East Carolina. So that's in Birmingham, Alabama as well, where this first game is. And then Protective Stadium there. Wisconsin, Oklahoma State is in Chase Field. They're going to play at the baseball stadium there at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona. So that'll be interesting to see that. Where I live in San Francisco, Oracle Park, then AT&T Park, used to have the feedhungry.com bowl every year, but they just didn't have enough people to attend, and so they had to move that bowl elsewhere. By the way, Buffalo 20-14 over Georgia State. If you're watching at the time we're taping, less than a minute to go in the third quarter. Georgia State was a 6-point favorite. All right, some hockey to go through real quick. Boston's still playing well. They're favored over Ottawa, Carolina, and Chicago. Would you lay 450 to 1 on a hockey game? I don't think you would. Anything can happen. That's how bad the Blackhawks are right now. Rangers and Washington, that's a good rivalry. Ovechkin's still looking to overtake Gordie Howe for second all-time in goal scoring. Pittsburgh at the Islanders. Minnesota at Winnipeg. Winnipeg, a home dog. Yeah, I think that's interesting right there. But Minnesota's been playing well. And look at the standings and Minnesota right there in the Western Conference. They're fourth in the Central Division. Overall, in the wild card scenarios, they are the first wild card right now. And then Winnipeg is second in their division in the Central Division of the Western Conference. So that's going to be an interesting game tonight. Dallas and Nashville, Toronto at St. Louis. Can't figure out which Blues team is going to show up. Toronto was on a 15 game point streak where they either got 1 or 2 points in those games. They did not take an L in any of those games. Calgary, Edmonton, a million goals they've given up as well too. And Calgary starting to play better. Colorado at Arizona. Of course, they'll be 2-1 favorite. Arizona not very good. Vancouver looking to trade Bo Horvat, the third leading goal scorer in the NHL. He's still there. The Twins are still there. The Horvat twins are still there. But according to people that I've talked to from Vancouver, they think that he's going to be traded because they give up a lot of goals and they are nowhere near playoff scenario of the wild card. They're 1, 2, 3, 4. They're fifth from the bottom in the wild card scenario in the West. And of course, the Sharks having a terrible year. They're below Vancouver right there at 28 points, 5 points back of Vancouver. The Grand Slam, the Los Angeles Kings are 115 over Vegas. They're playing better now. They're second. This is a big game for them because they're second, 5 points back of Vegas for first place in the Pacific Division. And in first place, you get the wild card teams versus having to play in this case would be the Seattle Kraken as the third place team in their division. We'll get more into hockey as we roll through after the new year, but wanted to give you the first day back after a 4-day break, 3-day break for hockey as well too. All right, the best bets segment, the never duplicated, unprecedented, world famous best bet segment. Of course, I gave you Memphis at 7.5. If you're watching the replays, the game has already started, so we don't have any score updates on that. But 7.5 right now for Memphis versus Utah State. Best bet segment. Remember, I'm hot. You may want to listen to me a little bit. Memphis, even though they lost to Golden State the other night, they've got the Phoenix Suns who struggle on the road. And looking at the injury list right now, Devin Booker is going to be out again. So that's 25 points. It's going to be gone from Phoenix as well. No injured players for Memphis. John Morant, I believe he's third or fourth in the league in scoring. Anyway, -8 at home. They have an unbelievable road record. They are 13-2 at home. Phoenix, meanwhile, on the road is 5-10, including their loss on Sunday night. So Memphis -8. Golden State, when they play at home, they look like the world champions. When they're on the road, they look like the worst team in the NBA. They look like the Houston Rockets, or they look like actually, they are the worst team on the road. They have the fewest wins on the road. At least Houston has 4 wins now on the road after their upset over Chicago. Golden State's still at 3-16 on the road, but they're 13-2 at home. And that's good enough to beat Boston at home. That's good enough to beat Memphis at home. It's good enough to beat all at home right now. So they're laying 4.5, which seems low to Charlotte. If Curry was playing, he'd go off for 50 because that's his hometown. But I still like Golden State -4.5. Now, a lot of people are going to question this one. The New York Knicks +5. They blew a big lead at home to Philadelphia. They don't play well at home. The Knicks on the road are 10-6. The Dallas Mavericks at home are 13-5. They did score 51 points against the Lakers in the third quarter the other day, but I just got a good feeling about the Knicks. Plus, Jalen Brunson is going to make his return back to Dallas after signing that free agent contract over the summer from Dallas after leading them to a big playoff run last year. So he comes back with the Knicks. They're playing well. They're in the 6th spot in the East. Meanwhile, Dallas in the 7th spot in the West. Take the Knicks +5. Clippers scored 141 points. I know it was an overtime, but they give up a lot of points on the road. Remember, Friday night, they blew a 19-point lead to the Philadelphia 76ers, and not only that, did not cover the +3.5 that they were given by Philadelphia. Toronto, at home, they play well. They score points. This game going over 218.5. Toronto, LA Clippers, over 218.5. Indiana at home. They play really well at home. They got beat by the Pelicans on the road. Back-to-back scenarios usually don't fare well, but I like Indiana at home. Atlanta still having a tough time on the road. And Trae Young, Nate McMillan trying to patch up their differences as star player to head coach. +1.5 for Indiana tonight. Philadelphia and Washington. Washington Wizards give Philadelphia trouble. They score a lot of points. They beat them when they're at home. 4.5 is the line for Philadelphia. I would not lay the 4.5 on Philadelphia, but I wouldn't take the 4.5 for Washington either. Over 225.5 for Philadelphia and Washington. Now, the bowl games tonight, I already gave you Memphis. Unfortunately, that game started. I don't like the Coastal Carolina, East Carolina game, but the way Wisconsin's offense has played this year and the fact they've gone through two coaches, Oklahoma State, they can score. I like it tonight in Arizona. I don't know if the dome's going to be closed at Chase or not. Probably not. But plus 4.5 for Oklahoma State tonight in the bowl game in Phoenix, Arizona. NHL, 3 quick games in the NHL before we say goodbye. Rangers 155 over Washington. That's a rivalry. They're going to try and keep Ovechkin from breaking the record. Minnesota, talked about Winnipeg playing well at home. Minnesota's playing really well. But I give Minnesota the edge tonight, minus 120 on the road. And then Calgary, minus 150 over the Edmonton Oilers. Calgary playing real well coming into the break. Some of these teams that were red hot going in probably did not want the 3 days off, but they're glad that they got them. And, of course, the teams on the bottom, any chance they get to have days off will be there as well, too. So there you have it. Memphis, Golden State, New York, Toronto, LAC over. Indiana, plus 1.5. Philadelphia, Washington over. The bowl games, Ohio State, or Oklahoma State, plus 4.5. Memphis, minus 7.5. Rangers, Minnesota, Calgary, 3 favorites in the NHL tonight. Don't forget, we'll be back on Thursday, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, NFL preview for Thursday Night Football. Cowboys-Titans, a big game for both. Dallas still has a shot at the East. Tennessee trying to stay in the playoff race. Jacksonville in first place there. NBA previews, NCAA previews. We're getting ready to conference games to start. Actually, some conferences have already gone in, but they're going to go full swing before the new year, and definitely after the new year, it'll be all conference play going into it. And then some bowl previews as well. NCAA semifinals for the BCS are Saturday afternoon, Michigan TCU, the first game, and then Georgia, Ohio State, the second game on New Year's Eve. The winners will play for the national championship on January 9th. If you're interested in sponsorships, contact me directly on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube page as well. And the Daily Post at 6 p.m. Eastern weekdays. Early on the weekends, I'll let you know as early as possible. Probably 11 o'clock on the weekends because of NCAA basketball on Saturdays and NBA basketball as well at those times. And, of course, hockey starts at 1 o'clock Eastern for the most part on Saturdays and Sundays as well. Don't forget, if you missed any of the segments, we got replays coming up at the top of each hour, 4 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Eastern, and they'll go about half hour, 35 minutes. You get your best bet segment. You get your info from the weekend. Hope everybody had a great Christmas weekend. We're heading into New Year's. We're heading into 2023. Follow my picks. I'm hot right now. I'm doing well, so keep checking them out. Pass it along to your friends, your work colleagues, everywhere you go. The VParty Sports Podcast. I'm Vasu, Vaddiparty. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy your Tuesday. We will see you on Thursday, 3 o'clock Eastern, for the VParty Sports Podcast. Take care, everybody. Have a good